Welcome back. Joining us now for the legislative response to Governor Florio's budget address are four men who will play a key role in the deliberations during the next 3.5 months. In the Senate, Senator Laurence Weiss is the chairman of the Revenue, Finance, and Appropriations Committee. While over in the Assembly, Assemblyman John Watson is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. The ranking Republican on the Senate committee is Senator John Ewing, while Assemblyman Rodney Frelinghuysen is the ranking Republican there. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight, and I guess those different committees are academic for this budget year anyway, since you're all going to be working together on a joint appropriations committee.
Right.
Senator Weiss, first question for you, because you told me that this budget asks state government to bite a very large caliber bullet. But at the same time, doesn't it ask legislators to risk political suicide because there's some tax hikes there, and you're all up for re-election next year?
All right. Everything has an element of risk in it. So does being elected to political office. And every once in a while, you have to get to the point where hard decisions have to be made. If that's a risk, then we're going to have to take it. If we don't, we just sit there and do nothing, it portends disaster for the near future. And I don't think the state of New Jersey can afford anything like that.
Senator Ewing, does this lead to some pretty easy political target practice for Republicans, since Governor Florio ran on a platform that said he saw no new need for taxes?
Oh, I think it does make some very easy targets, but also I think we have a duty to the citizens of the state to review the whole budget very, very carefully and see if we can't make further cuts to certainly forestall or omit any tax increases. I think it's imperative that we do this very, very carefully, because we don't want to see any increases unless they're absolutely necessary. And many of us are hopeful and feel that we can find additional cuts to go along with those that Governor Florio has already proposed.
Assemblyman Watson, your House, any tax hikes, they have to originate from the Assembly. Is there anybody in your House who's lining up right now to raise any of those sales taxes that the governor is talking about, or raising the income tax?
Well, number one, I must say that the governor gave us a very courageous and bold message here today. We know that we have many, many problems facing us that we have inherited from the last administration. The problems are horrendous as far as I'm concerned, and when you talk about taxes, raising taxes, I think we all have concern about the kind of taxes we raise and how we raise our taxes, but yet we got to always think of the property tax reform when we're doing whatever we're doing. I'm sure that we have, many of us in the House, we're talking about the different kind of things that we should be doing, but it'll all be out there in the middle of the table for my committee, working with the Senate committee, bringing about the kind of revenues that's necessary to take care of the problem that we're facing here today.
Assemblyman Frelinghuysen, Governor Florio may have run on a platform of no new taxes, or seeing the need for no new taxes anyway, but as he and his staff have often pointed out, he's facing almost a $600 million shortfall right now, and that's a problem he inherited from the previous Republican administration. Doesn't that make it harder for your side of the aisle to take pot shots at him?
Well, I don't think anyone thought the shortfall would be as high as it is, and I think we should point out that the receipt of major taxes was considerably below what the former governor, Tom Kean, projected, and I think to a certain extent that's put us in a very difficult position. But as I think John Watson, my colleague, intimated, I think there's going to be some real concern about some of the tax proposals that are being put forward. The fairness of a sales tax, extending the present sales tax to articles that are not presently taxable, and of course the prospect of raising the income tax is going to raise the shackles of both, I think, Republicans and Democrats, and I think there'll be considerable discussion, and I would think perhaps bipartisan opposition to some of the things that the governor laid out in his program.
Well, what's unfair about raising the income tax, or what's for the people that the governor says who can most afford it? We're talking about people who make over $55,000 a year.
Well, for two wage earners earning $55,000, many today earn over $55,000, and I think if we're going to consider that a high-income taxpayer and we're going to raise their income taxes, I think there's going to be some strong opposition from citizens who see otherwise. And I think there's a general feeling that the state of New Jersey doesn't run its shop as tightly as it should, and there should be some more budget cuts before we talk about new tax increases.
Senator Weiss, and then Assemblyman Watson. Go ahead.
Okay.
You wanted to respond?
I wanted to respond. Yes, the Assemblyman does have a point. There's going to be a lot of debate over the taxes. But we're at a point now where some hard decisions are going to have to be made. And you and I discussed before the large caliber bullet we're going to have to swallow. And it's going to be difficult. The decisions are going to be difficult. And I'm not saying that everyone down there wants to vote for a tax. In my heart, I don't want to vote for one either. But sometime along the line, you have to have enough courage to recognize that we do have a problem, and that the only way out of this dilemma is, as Rodney says, to cut government more or raise taxes. We're going to cut government more after taking the last $1.8 billion down out of the recommendations. I find it hard, to locate those places mentally at this moment. I don't know what else we can cut. Besides, I think last year we were talking about cutting $600 million from the budget. We finally wound up cutting 350, as I recall,
yes, that's right.
And 350. There was a lot of blood on the table. With 600, I think the term used at the time, there was going to be flesh and bone with that blood, and I think we're back to that area right now. This budget has a lot of shortfalls in it, sure. Caused by state government, by no one else. I mean, the constituents didn't cause the problem, but we spent money, and we spent money in some instances outlandishly. Some places it was prudent, but it's hard to reconcile at the moment where those places were. But
All right, Assemblyman Watson.
Well, when you begin to talk about raising the revenues from the income tax, $55,000 and over, I think the governor only stated at the end that over the $100,000 would be 7%, but there's a progression between the $55,000 and up to where we're going. So I don't think those over $55,000 will be hit as bad or as some think. I think what we're after is those that are over 100,000. I think we got about 18% that we're looking at overall.
Senator,
but most of it is coming from those over 100,000.
Let me ask Senator Ewing a question. I'll let you respond, Assemblyman Frelinghuysen. Isn't it a fair trade-off, though, if you increase the income tax on those who can most afford it, if it ends up giving a property tax break to everybody?
Well, it's a question of whether people can really afford it or whether it's going to drive some of these people out of the state of New Jersey. Prior to the elimination of the inheritance tax, there were many people taking up residence in Florida simply for that reason, so they didn't have to pay the New Jersey inheritance tax. And I think there is a potential at a certain area, maybe up above 5 or 5.5%, where people are seriously going to feel that they would move out of state, possibly. And I think this has to be looked at very, very carefully. Of course, we've just heard about the budget. Nobody's really studied it yet. So we have to get into the meat of it and get into the details and see exactly what some of the experts are going to give us some information on as to whether they feel it will hurt or it won't hurt. I don't think we can decide that here tonight or just come up with a quick shot and say yes or no.
Assemblyman Frelinghuysen?
Well, there's certainly some downsides, and they have to be carefully measured for raising taxes. I think it can have, it can put the kibosh on a lot of desire of businesses to expand, people to relocate here. But to the governor's credit, he's embraced a suggestion of Senator Weiss, long-standing, of a rainy day fund. I think that's a commendable part of this budget, as well as a cap on spending, a state spending cap, doing, in fact, what our municipalities and counties have to do under law. The reimposition of that cap is, I think, something which would meet with bipartisan support, and I think that gets to the point of accountability, and those are the sort of measures we want to see in place before we see new taxes.
Can the state afford? Oh, go ahead.
can the state afford what?
No, I was going to let you respond to Assemblyman
Well,
Frelinghuysen, and then I have a question for all of you.
Let me get back to Senator Ewing. Senator Ewing indicates that people will move out of state if, in fact, over 100,000, Jack.
Possibly.
Yeah, okay, 7.5%. There's that possibility, and I agree with you. But you and I have been down that road before, especially on the next subject matter that you mentioned, and that was the transfer inheritance tax. When that came about, my mail was delivered to me by the bushel full, because it was in my committee at the time, and I think Rodney got the other end of that thing, didn't you? You know, I determined after the exercise was all over that those who pushed for that particular tax were those senior citizens who had estates somewhere up to $150,000, and they got no advantage from that. Mm-hmm. And they said they were going to move to Florida. I can hardly believe that they would move to Florida under either case, because if they do, they're going to be faced. They sell everything in New Jersey, otherwise they're subject to tax here. They're going to be faced with a capital gains tax, you know, which is even worse, considering it.
No, I would just like to add to that you know. The former governor stated over and over again, even when he received the SLRP report, that he would not be dealing with the income tax factor, which was the major part of that report. But you must remember that in the Northeast Corridor, our state is the lowest in the corridor itself. And what are they going to do? You tax over 100,000, and you're still lower, and they're going to jump out of the pot into the fire. There's some other state that's going to be higher than our state as it is. So about leaving the state, that had no credibility as far as I was concerned, even in the other administration, because we know that what we had here was a much lower tax than New York and others in dealing with the income tax.
We're going to be taxing, I won't say bread and butter, but we're going to be taxing sin, and I think that's going to make some people angry. Well, there may be some social value in taxing liquor and cigarettes, but I must say that it's going to raise some people's shackles, and I think there's going to be quite a lot of comment on that. Getting back to the sales tax, it is going to put New Jersey in a position, at least on the items that will be taxable now, expanding the number that will be taxable. We're going to have one of the highest sales tax in the country, and I think that is going to be a factor that a lot of people are going to find to be quite oppressive.
You think that's going to hurt business in New Jersey? Do you think tax revenues will actually go down, or do you think that it's going to raise the amount because people will go either to New York or Pennsylvania to shop? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about on the sales tax on other items.
Yeah, but we don't do it on clothing.
New Jersey does not have a tax on clothing, nor does it have a tax on food. And that's a real progressive tax. It takes care of all those people that have to be taken care of, and the rest of us, I suppose, run along with the advantage, which is not bad, incidentally. I don't think that it's the intention of Governor Florio or anyone else to extend that tax to food and clothing. Now, that's practically a no-no. I don't think that I could buy it, and I don't know anyone at this table that would volunteer to even vote for it.
It may be difficult for them to volunteer for any, but we'll see.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. But the New Jersey sales tax is at 6%. If it goes to 7%, we're way maybe like 3 or 4 cents under New York. By the time you add the city sales tax and everything else onto it, they've outdistanced us by almost 50% again. Now, I'm not really sure what Pennsylvania's tax is, but I would, if Pennsylvania's tax is the same as ours or close to it, I don't think people are going to run over there to do all their shopping. New Jersey's still a good state to buy in. I'd love to buy here.
Well, the people in South Jersey, though, as I understand, will go over to Delaware where they're building new shopping centers because there's no sales tax there.
But it costs like $2 to go over that bridge and back, so why even go?
When we looked last year at cigarette taxes, as of course, the industry came up with arguments against it, but there is a certain cutoff line, and I presume the administration has reviewed that, where people will go over to Pennsylvania and buy cigarettes, and in fact that will result, as you point out, Larry, in a decline in revenue. But obviously the type of revenues we need, we're concerned about, are corporate business income and sales tax, and that's where that fuels the state.
And if they go out of state to get a car or something, they have to pay the use tax when they bring it back in.
Yeah.
Or if they import lumber or bathroom fixtures or something to build a new house, they have to pay a use tax. So, you know, they can't really go out for those big major items.
Yeah.
Sure, they can get a television in another state and put it in the trunk and bring it in, and nobody knows. That's
So am I
any
hearing sort of
problem.
an acceptance here from
No,
you guys?
I don't
But
get
you haven't heard from
acceptance.
me. You know, like in dealing with the regressive tax, which is the sales tax, and you know, I must say that we were talking about, yes, items like drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and disposable diapers, and those kind of things. You know, I know that in our communities in the cities, you got hundreds of thousands of people, poor people, who right now can't even afford a doctor. And then they prescribe their own drugs, and what they do, they go to the drugstore and say, well, for a kidney ache, well, I want a kidney pills, or you know something. They spend an awful lot of money on over the counter. They can't afford to even spend that. But then when you add taxes to that, it's just even more of a burden. But now I'm not just saying we're not going to deal with that. The thing is, I think, once again, when you put it all in the center of the table, all the tax and all the revenue raises that we can, we're going to begin to take into consideration of who it will hurt most in this state, and we begin to take a look at where we can raise our revenues.
Let me just interject one question here, and then I'll let you move on with the discussion for Assemblyman Watson. Am I sort of hearing a little bit of compromise? Maybe we won't do a 7% sales tax on non-prescription drugs, but maybe 3% would be palatable?
I'm not here stating any one. I would like to leave that for the committee to decide which is best for all of us in this state. You know, I may have my feelings, but it'll be known in the committee. But yet we'll have probably other input that will tell us other things that we will have to know in it. So, you know, I'm saying let's put it all on the table and begin to deal with what we have to deal with.
If we're doing that, we ought to put on the table what people will have to pay under the so-called insurance reform program, and in terms of what it will mean to their health benefits. I mean, that's a major part of everybody's pocketbook, and I don't think that that's going to lessen. If you have a hospital stay, you have major costs, and if you have to pay for some sort of a care out of a hospital, those costs aren't lessening in any way.
Probably so, but we're working on what's in the budget, and that's
but we got overall.
Okay, I understand that, but let me get back to the sales tax. John indicated that he's against certain parts of the sales tax. At least that's what it sounded like to me, and I can understand that. But hey, fellas, this is the opening gun, okay? Compromise, that's the art of politics. There's a part of politics, the art of compromise. Whatever way you want to take it, that's what this is. That's why we're here.
And Larry, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
120 men in
we did it last year. It took a while.
Of course. It took
I
a
remember
while.
a 3 a.m. signing.
In 1983, when we passed an income tax and a raise in the sales tax, I believe, at the time, and again, hey, it didn't go through easily.
One thing I do know.
But there's one thing that we have to keep in mind. We either cut that budget further, or we get some revenues. Now, if anyone at this table is willing to,
I want to know where
you want to say
from the Republican side of the aisle, where else would you cut this budget?
Well, I think the governor has made a start. I get back to a cap on state spending, and if in fact
and that was in the governor's message,
if we had that cap in effect since the time it expired 6 or 7 years ago, I think they said we would have $6 or $7 billion that we might have that could be used to reduce what we have today.
Rodney, it would be,
and there's some sensible things we can do.
Absolutely.
But the workforce of the state workforce has not been reduced in this budget. As a matter of fact, it's been increased by 400 employees. We have 85,000 state employees, and we're really not reducing that number. And I must say, I'd like to tell my constituents that we're reducing the size of the state budget by reducing the payroll.
I don't think I could speak for the governor, but I'm going to try, okay? He's been in office for just about 2 months. As a matter of fact, the 16th, right? 2 months tomorrow. I think he's done a magnificent job. A lot of people left state government for whatever reason. And you know that some of those are going to be replaced. But have a feeling that the governor means what he says when he indicates that there will be people will leave the state government on the basis of attrition. I really do feel that. But if you want to, and I think he's going to follow through, because it seems to me like Governor Florio is pretty courageous. I mean, he's taken on some tough issues. You mentioned one, the insurance. He's come up now with the proposal of taxes, and he said during the campaign, and I agree with everyone else, he said there'll be no taxes. But between, between candidate Florio, Governor-elect Florio, and Governor Florio, there's a lot of difference. The difference is, when he was a candidate, he was like everyone else. That was on the outside looking in. He didn't understand or didn't see what government was.
Yeah, but
now,
his people had to know the situation.
His people may have
had to know. Both sides knew.
Let me run this by you, Jack. What's happening with the Bush administration in Florida?
We're talking about New Jersey.
Tom Kane offered the gubernatorial candidate an opportunity to see and meet with his fiscal people.
I'm not sure they have.
But you know,
they haven't,
Larry,
or have.
So I think up until December of '89, Tom Kane continued to talk about we had $300 million surplus.
Well, we did. We adopted the budget,
but in the same time, we had almost $1 billion shortfall.
Not that time.
You and Rodney,
we've been spending money in the legislature.
You and I went through that ourselves. You were chairman of that committee, and I was chairman of the other.
He was overly optimistic.
He was extremely optimistic.
He did give gubernatorial candidate Florio an opportunity to see what a fiscal situation
really was,
and he knew what he was getting into.
And Florio wound up in it.
But I see,
and he got what he deserved.
But I'm not really sure.
Both campaigns.
I'm not really sure anyone deserves that.
Both campaigns ran on a no new taxes platform, and they both had the availability of your expertise and your expertise. And I remember taping a program with both of you gentlemen after the last budget was adopted, where you predicted the state was going to come up with a $1 billion shortfall.
Long time ago.
So shouldn't have Governor Florio, when he was candidate Florio, been listening to you?
He must have talked to you.
Well, in fairness, though, Assemblyman, shouldn't Jim Porter have been listening to you? But the bottom line now is that you're in a hole. You're in a hole right now.
And we've got to get out.
And you got to get out of the hole. Now, one of the things that the governor proposed in his message was picking up some court costs as another way of relieving the local property tax.
But Larry, don't leave the point. Don't leave the point that you made that the senator should have given the governor advice to the budget or Rodney. Now,
I tried to give Tom advice.
we were playing on the assembly side, saying that this was a smoke and mirror budget. The estimates were out of line. We didn't vote. Not one member voted for that budget. Well, we knew that there was going to be problems. I also, along with the senator, said that it would be close to $1 billion shortfall, if you recall. And on top of that, one thing with the senator on his side, we had to have a balanced budget.
Required.
And the governor certifies those numbers himself. He certified those numbers way out of whack. And we knew that too. We knew all of this was gimmickry and what was being done to say. But we knew also, I knew at this time, sitting here with you tonight, that we'd be in bad shape here in this state, and we are.
Okay, you're all veterans. You've all been through, I don't know how many Appropriations Committee hearings, I don't know how many years you've been. If we put all your years together, it would,
compared to Jack, we'd be young.
All right, in any event, the governor in his budget address talked about the state picking up some county costs, court costs, welfare costs, that sort of things. Is there enough money in what he's talking about in the tax hikes that he is proposing, in the economies that he is proposing in state government? Is he going to have enough money to do that too, to be able to follow through with that kind of property tax?
How can you tell until we see the actual data come in as what the county costs are? I haven't seen anything that shows me what Somerset County spends for indigent patients or things of that nature. Until we see that, we can't really say. Also, I would not be for that unless we put a cap on the county spending as well, because you just pass the money through, they're going to get more parks or more
Yes.
cars or more this or that. There's got to be a tight control.
What happens to home rule, though?
Well,
if you do that?
and if the state takes over those costs, are we going to end up having the same bargaining unit for all those employees? And at least with some county governments have their own bargaining units, and they can keep costs under control that relate to other employees. If the state takes it over, you can have the potential of work stoppages and job actions and salary increases that might bust the budget at some future date.
The answer to your question is probably in the long run. That can be done, but it would have to have conditions attached to it. You have 3 political subdivisions: municipalities, counties, and a state, and everyone is going to have to do his share or bite his bullet. It just can't be state level politics or state level money, if you will. Everyone has to recognize that there is a responsibility to that taxpayer out there, regardless of what party you're in,
and
regardless of what town you're in, regardless of what county you're in. It's important because we have a lot of people out there that look to us for some sort of salvation. And under current circumstances, they're not going to get too much.
How hard a sell does Jim Florio have on this budget? He said the other day when he had an informal lunch with reporters out on the lawn in front of the Capitol that he was prepared to vigorously go out and campaign for this budget proposal of his. In effect, go to the people, go over your heads. I think he also said it was, he didn't, the lessons of Ronald Reagan going over Congress's head were not lost on him. What's your reaction to that, and what do you think the reaction
I think it'll be a negotiated process. I think that's
As
a healthy
always,
thing.
as always.
The governor proposes, the legislature disposes, and I think we ought to wrangle these things out and work them out in committee, because I think there are a lot of taxes there that are going to really rustle some feathers, and I think they're not going to find a lot of bipartisan acceptance. And I think it's better to work with us and use the process that's been proven to be effective over the years.
Assemblyman Watson, if this bill had to come before your chamber today, this budget proposal, how much of it would survive?
Well, I can't give you that kind of how much would survive. The only thing that I can say in regards to the overall request from the governor today, that it was a bold, honest budget that he's given us. It is up to us now to sit down, as Rodney said, as men of good conscience and women of good conscience, and to sit down and begin to figure out what is the best way to do it. I'm not saying that what the governor gave us today was the absolute. It's not. It's never the absolute. But I tell you one thing, he's very close to what we have to do, because it was a bare bones kind of a situation that was given to us, and on top of it, it was an honest, upfront budget. And we all know the problems that we're facing in the next 2 or 3 years when we have to get the job done.
Except in the way of personnel. I agree with Rodney there. There was not a definite cut, and I think we can, having worked on the personnel subcommittee there for Larry, there are areas in there that we have to go through with a fine-tooth comb and really cut out more people. There's no question of it.
Is it the middle management types that the governor is talking
Well,
about?
he's talking about that right now.
He's talking about that.
Is that what you'd aim for, too?
Well, in other areas as well.
Well, you know, you're absolutely right in regards to cutting back on the middle management people, because we, in the last administration, Jack, we put on over 4,500 middle management people that should have never been put on in the first place.
You never liked that executive corps, did you, John?
You remember, and I spoke against that, did I not?
Well, you did. You did.
Right, and believe me, I'm in accord with you on that. I know we got a lot of things to do within the next few months, and we have to take a look at that personnel, and we're going to do that, and don't think we're going to let that slip by us.
It looks like John doesn't want those replaced, and I don't blame him. I don't think any of us really do. The criticism may be there now. Maybe we'll be able to cure it at some time.
Well, as long as you have some managers, they did represent, Senator, they did represent management somewhat unfettered, and that was supposed to.
I'm not sure about the unfettered. I could agree.
All right.
Excuse me, I have to interrupt you. Senator Weiss, so many issues to tackle. Assemblyman Watson, Assemblyman Frelinghuysen, Senator Ewing. So many issues, so little time. You're not going to start deliberating this thing until April. Or am I going to be in the governor's outer office again at 3 o'clock in the morning watching him sign a budget?
It's too soon to tell, but I hope that we get done with it much before that time. But if you have to be there at 3 o'clock on July the 1st, you'll be there.
Oh, I'll be there. I was there last year.
It's part of the action.
Yeah, but we're going to work more.
What I'm trying to get at here, in a real quick
Okay, I
answer, are
understand.
we going to have the political twisting, turning, and wrestling that we had with this last budget?
no doubt
and,
about
and
it.
just a quick
It's always there, Larry. It's always there. You can't get away from it, but I think we have some reasonable people that we can talk to, both sides of the aisle.
All right, well, one thing's for sure, you're all going to be in the spotlight between now and July 1st. You and the governor and his budget message will all be watching to see what you're doing. I'm Larry Stuelpnagel. You have been watching the legislative response to Governor Jim Florio's first budget message. Thank you for joining us, and have a good night.